This is CounselCast, and I'm your host, Karin Conroy, your marketing co-counsel. In every episode, I discuss marketing topics with experts who answer your questions and help your law firm achieve next-level results. Here's today's guest.
Karin, great to be with you. I've been looking forward to this opportunity to talk about how branding applies to law firms. This is an interesting topic.
It is. Jed, thank you so much for being here. The title for today's show is Why Budget Branding is Killing Your Law Firm's Growth. I know you talk a lot about scaling and how branding and scaling work together. Let's jump in right away and let's talk about where are people going wrong with their branding.
I see a lot of professional services firms assume that the quality of their service is going to carry the day.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's so true. We have a whole article I recently wrote about how the number of times in the initial call that it starts with, I don't really do marketing. I haven't really been doing marketing. I just get a lot of referrals and do a lot of word of mouth. And I'm like, that's marketing. Let's start with this idea that yes, you are, but you're probably not doing it well. You probably don't have systems around it and you could probably do it better. But let's start by switching up that script. And yes, you are doing marketing, but we're going to make it better.
Exactly. And the challenge with relying on your services to communicate the value to your current and prospective clients is until those prospective clients have had an opportunity to work with you, they won't know what it's like.
Yeah. Okay, so the difference between just leading with your services and then trying to express what it's like to work with you, how do you do that?
The best way to give people a preview of what it's like to work with you is to communicate your value in a way that's relevant to each of the audiences you serve.
Okay.
So in addition to having an overarching brand message, your umbrella strategic brand narrative, you also need to have audience-specific messages that tailor, tune, and target your unique value to the pain points, the problems, the jobs to be done of each and every audience that matters to the future growth of your firm.
Okay, so let's break that down. So what does that mean in terms of, first of all, how do you define these different audiences?
The first step to defining the different audiences you need to adapt your messaging to is to think about your ideal client.
Okay.
So if you can find or think about who would be representative of the kinds of clients you would like to have more of, either looking back over the course of your firm's growth and development or thinking in the future about what kinds of clients would be ideal for you to serve and understanding the why behind that, to getting below the surface, moving beyond superficial cliche conversations or assumptions, and to really have some conversations with people. Yeah. Go back to former clients and find out why it worked for them and discuss, debrief as a team why you internally thought it was a good engagement.
Yeah.
And get really crystal clear about what it was about the characteristics of those kinds of organizations at a company level. If you're working with other companies or individuals, if you're working with directly marketing to and engaging with consumers or individuals, what was it about the engagement that really worked so that you can then go communicate the kinds of value to those audiences that made it click?
Yeah. A lot of my clients will initially assume that the different audiences means they're different practice areas. And that's not necessarily correct. Like within one practice area, you could have a different kind of client. We worked with a DUI attorney and they found that by the time they had initially contacted us, they had been doing this for years and years. And they found that a lot of times the people who are contacting them were not these 19-year-old kids who had got a DUI. It was their moms, because that's who's paying for the attorney. And that's who, they kind of go to when they're in trouble. And also that's who is going to work through the solution. So, within that audience, that is a different group of people who you're going to speak to. And it's a different message talking to the mom about what they care about versus even really what their kid cares about. Their kid just cares about, getting this done and over with and off their record and moving on. The mom is probably thinking about a whole other set of issues that they're concerned about. So when you look at the people who you've worked with in the past, even within one specific practice area, it could be a handful. You could have a group of moms that you've worked with. You could have a group where, I don't know what other examples I can think of off the top of my head, but in that sort of DUI group, you could have a handful of different types of clients. And then you look at those and you say, okay, these are the ones that have historically been the easiest to work with, the best, they pay the best, or, whatever criteria you think are, the best that you want to build the rest of your practice off of.
That's exactly right. You think about the approver, the person who's going to be approving the engagement.
Yeah.
The buyer, the person who's actually going to sign, and the user, the person who's going to engage with you and benefit from your services directly. So all three of those perspectives need to be considered as you think about your ideal customer or client profile and the people who approve, buy, and use your services at a customer persona level. Getting crystal clear about these personas is a big deal. We found in our practice that we try not to go into too much detail. We only want to know the information that's relevant to the relationship that we have with these folks. So unless we're going to be advertising on their favorite radio station, we don't need to know what they listen to.
Yeah.
We do need to know where they hang out. So we need to know where they are on social media so that we can target our marketing campaigns to intercept them. We need to be part of the community in ways that are relevant to them. And that's ultimately the goal, is to be relevant. How do we position ourselves to be relevant when they're in need of a service like ours? And what messages resonate? What messages communicate something of value that connects us to them in a meaningful way so that we can have a deep and long-lasting relationship?
So while you're talking, I'm thinking about how complicated it is to craft those kinds of messages. And coming back to this idea of people doing like the budget, cheap DIY version of branding and thinking that they can put this together themselves, I hear quite a bit. I'm a lawyer, I can write, but there's a difference in the way that you draft a legal brief versus the way you put a messaging campaign together for a law firm. So can you give me some examples of how this is done in the wrong way? So where people kind of go cheap or cheap out on the message and kind of do this in a way that does not resonate and does not do all of the things that you just listed?
Assumptions are the kiss of death when it comes to making effective marketing messages.
Yeah.
It's kind of like gift giving. We like to think of branding as a gift that is well received. And what I mean by that is, have you ever received a gift that someone bought for you that communicated that they knew and understood you, made you feel really appreciated? The only thing better than receiving that kind of a gift is giving it.
Yeah.
And to be a good gift giver is similar to being a good brander, because you have to be perceptive, observant, and empathetic. You have to genuinely care about what it is the person is going through to tailor a message and align your offering to what it is they need. If we assume we know someone, we can make some pretty serious missteps. There was a time when I made the mistake of giving my wife a garden-themed Mother's Day gift.
Oh, no.
And I got a couple of the items right, but I gave her a petite shovel.
Oh,
and
no.
She looked at me and she said, "Jed, you know what you can do with this shovel?" I missed the mark. And it was because I had leaned too hard into this theme without considering her specific needs. She wanted to plant flowers. She didn't want to dig post holes for a fence. and so close proximity, even familiarity, doesn't guarantee connection. We really have to be perceptive. We have to get below the surface. We have to understand and look for what I like to call insights.
Yeah.
And we can have one set of messages that resonates with one audience, but if we don't adapt that audience, I think of it as like a Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
Each color on the face, on the side of the Rubik's Cube, let's think about that as a message that is designed to resonate with a specific audience. If you, Karin, are a white-oriented audience, and I show you one of the 9 tiles on one side of a Rubik's Cube as white, there's very little signal and a lot of noise that could interfere with that message, could confuse the customer. Whereas if I solve your messaging puzzle and you have nothing but purely relevant messages on that complete, all 9 tiles communicate relevant services and support, and assistance for what is troubling you, the chances of you wanting to continue that conversation and convert to being a client are a lot higher.
Yeah.
So we've got to communicate and show the right side of our messaging to each audience in a way that is tailored and tuned to what matters to them.
Yeah. I love this idea of it being that kind of intuitive, thoughtful gift, because everybody, hopefully, that's listening has got that kind of gift where you're like, whoa, you like just took it to the next level. It creates that connection with the person that all of a sudden is different. Like all of a sudden you're like, okay, this is amazing. This is impressive. I feel, like I said, more connected to this person, but I feel like they get me. And that is what I've seen over and over that messaging does when it does it right. So let's go to an example of a website, because I use this example quite a bit. And this is where especially older websites come in a lot of times, and we'll have our first conversation and I take a look at their website, and the first main message on the homepage is, we are X lawyers in Y city and we do Z practice area, period. That's it. Like, here we are, we do this thing, and then here's a picture of a skyline. And it's, come get us,
Right.
And it's sort of like old school Yellow Pages ads, like you put your name out there and you build it and they will come. And you have this assumption, like you're saying, that the business will just flow because your name is up in public. But the kind of messaging that you're talking about does none of that. That is not at all a gift. That is not a connection. That is just, this giant kind of burly bull coming into a china shop and just going, bonkers and doing what a bull in a china shop does.
Exactly.
So can you give me an example of how you would dismantle that kind of a failed message and what you would do instead?
We've learned through experience and working with professional services firms that it's really important to make clients the center of the story.
Yeah.
Who you serve, the problems they have should be the hero of the story. Not your firm, not your office building, not your credentials. So that is the first guiding principle that we guide our clients toward, is to recognize that the hero of your story is your client. And because you've already taken time to get clear about the specific kinds of clients who are a great fit for you, you can tailor and revolve your world around a specific kind of client, not just any client, but a particular kind. And I recently drove through Las Vegas, and if you've ever seen the billboards for injury attorneys that line the freeway driving through Vegas, you can see what we call the sea of sameness.
Yes.
And you could switch out pictures of attorneys and the names of their firms, and it's indistinguishable. You can't tell one from the other. There has to be a unique perspective, a unique point of differentiation. The essence of strategy, Paul Gustafson's a friend of ours, an organizational design consultant, and he likes to say that strategy comes down to two things, and they are doing different things and doing things differently.
That's good.
We have to be different to stand out.
Yes. And I think this is where, especially for lawyers who their job is to be risk averse, like their job is to pull you back from the things that are going to create more legal problems, and that is where there is a challenge with law firms, is this idea of being different feels a little scary, and they would rather just go and do the same thing that, the guy down the street is doing. And in 2010, I started this contest called the Best Law Firm Website on lawyerist.com. Back in the day, it used to be this more of a collaborative blog. Now it's a different site. They still do this contest. And it's been going on for 15 years. It is their highest trafficked blog post. It has been for the last 15 years. And so I recently was on their podcast talking about, first of all, what I've learned over the last 15 years. They've kind of run with the contest since, but what I found over and over, especially in those first few years of the contest, is I would get call after call saying, hey, I saw this firm that did this website. Can you just make that for me? It's like, why would you want some other law firm's website? But this is at the heart of the problem with so much marketing, is because they just want that kind of quick, easy copycat answer. And that is what's going to fail.
That fails big, and it doesn't scale.
Right. Okay, so let's get into scaling. Let's talk more about that, because I think that's the opposite of doing the cheap branding and, getting caught in that copycat, cheap, budget type stuff. So let's talk about how to scale.
Everybody loves to cite classic case studies of successful brands.
Yeah.
So whether it's Nike, Apple, Amazon, then it's our turn to create big and great brands that can scale for our own enterprises. And we often sell ourselves short because we're unwilling to do the work.
Yes, exactly.
And the work that I'm talking about is building on this idea of insight into your audiences and understanding, unpacking the points of connection that resonate with them, and then taking the time to clarify and articulate specific value propositions or messages. Sometimes benefit statements is another way of saying it, unique selling propositions.
Yeah.
And testing to see which of those messages resonate. We have a process we call message market fit, where we think about, in collaboration with clients, what are the messages we think are going to resonate? And then we take the time to talk with actual clients and find out what resonates with them, what changes they might make, and if there are other ways of communicating something that they experienced that they found valuable in their working relationship with our client firms.
I think this is so important. This idea of taking a handful of messages and then testing them. And a lot of times I'll get this kickback where it's like, well, why don't we just go with the one? Because why would we waste our time with the other ones that are wrong? And what's your answer to that? What's the point of testing this stuff?
If we don't take time to test messages, we run the risk of putting resources behind messages that are missing the mark.
Yes.
And you can have a lot of at-bats, but if you're not connecting with the ball, you're going to have foul balls, base hits, instead of doubles, triples, home runs, and even grand slams.
Yeah.
So being open to being wrong, being open to making adjustments, and going through iterative cycles of learning and refining your messaging until you find what resonates and connect, and then scale.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't like to call it wrong. And I hate calling it things like mistakes or this wasn't right, this was wrong, because it's all data. Those other answers, like even in design, when we kind of come up with a version and so we don't like this, and here's why. This is why it's not working. And though it's just data, and like you're talking about these iterations that are getting you to the best possible answer. And it's like, you don't take the first draft. There's a reason that the editors in any book or movie or whatever are just as important as any other part. You have to go through and get it to that final version. The other thing I talk about a lot, and I'm probably not going to belabor this part, is when people get that first draft and they compare it to some final version. So they'll, get either the first design or first draft of something and they're like, wait a minute. It's like, wait a minute. We haven't gone through the process. You got to, give us the time and do all those iterations and go through that work. It's like showing up at the gym for one day and be like, why don't I look like, it's like, that's not how it works.
That's not how it works. And even if you just talk to 3 people per audience,
yes,
it gives you much more insight to go with and hopefully put you on the right path and track to connect with them when you give them your gift as a gifted branding person and strategist.
Well, and this piece that you're describing, kind of taking it to your clients and getting that feedback, you don't have to hire a team for this. This is stuff that you should be able to do yourself in your own firm. And some of this you should already know by talking to your clients. You should know what these major pain points that they have when they first call you are, the things that they really care the most about, the kind of pressing questions that they keep coming back to. And then as you refine that message that responds to those things, then you go back and you say, okay, A, B, or C. And
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the more contact you have with customers, the more likely you are of interpreting their needs correctly. It does help to have a third-party partner conduct interviews and to validate messaging through that testing, iterative process of refinement, because sometimes clients are more willing to open up to a third party instead of someone who they don't want to hurt their feelings, or maybe they're a little more guarded because they feel vulnerable or something like that. So even having tandem teams do
Yeah.
interviews with one third-party professional facilitator of these kinds of conversations with somebody from the firm listening in, that might be a good way to approach it. So you get the benefit of knowledge being transferred directly to the internal long-term team of the firm, combined with the expertise of a third-party partner who's really skilled at this kind of conversation.
Yeah, I think that's true. Plus, you've done this many, many times, and you have that outsider perspective where you know the kinds of questions and how to push people in a direction that helps articulate, what's working and how to get to that refined message.
That reminds me, if you don't mind, I have
Yeah,
a story to share quickly. We were working with a company, happened to be a software company, and they had been raising money for their software product and platform. They already had some customers who liked the software, were renewing year to year. It was taking a long time, however, to sell additional customers. So I listened to the founders and helped them refine the messages they thought would resonate. Then we took those messages to a trade show. It was in the agricultural industry that we were working in this particular instance. And so we went to the Fargo Dome in Fargo, North Dakota.
Yeah.
And we tested the messaging. We intercepted people who were walking the trade show floor and happened to be in the big arena where the local football team has been national champions. Anyway, huge, larger than life tractors all around us. And we tested a message that we assumed would connect. We said that the software tracked assets in the cloud. And I asked one of the attendees, what do you think of when you hear the word cloud? And he said, dark. And I said, why is that? He said, because clouds block the sun. And then I said, what about asset? He said, that makes me think of financial assets. We were hoping he would take away trucks and equipment. And he said, well, why didn't you say that in the first place?
Yeah.
We made the mistake of assuming that the same messages that resonated with investors, high net worth individuals, venture capital firms, and angel investors would resonate with this farmer out in North Dakota that had 5,000 acres of sugar beets and didn't know how to track his trucks and equipment to make sure that the harvest came into the right offloading points, which is what the software did. So you can have the right message for one audience, but it's not the right one for another. And that's what this testing process helps to avoid.
Well, and when you're describing a really brief, succinct message, like tracking assets in the cloud versus tracking trucks and equipment?
Equipment,
Yeah. It sounds so simple, but those brief messages like that are the most complicated. When you're really paring it down and you're going like one word at a time and when you start going through this process of doing testing on ads and testing on when we test graphics versus content and we do multiple iterations of the same ads, it's fascinating to see over time. And, 1 week, one is doing great, and the next week it's not. And so there's so many variables at place. And when you think about how much meaning is behind every single word, and then you add the layers of like industry meaning and, local meaning and all of this stuff, it's really difficult to try to anticipate what that's going to mean without just asking people and, getting out there and testing stuff.
And the fun of it is it's a co-creative process.
Yeah.
And so you're going to get inspiration and insight from the people you talk to, and you will create something together that's going to elevate the level of resonance that you have with your audiences. It'll be hard to tell who created it because you will have had ideas, they will have contributed ideas, and it's the blend, it's the combination of the two that takes you to the next level. There's another experience where we were talking to a variety of people on behalf of an independent public accounting firm in my home market here in the Salt Lake City area. And there was this idea of blind spots. And that idea came from a conversation I had with someone who was a longtime partner of the firm, had referred a bunch of clients. She happened to work for a venture capital firm. They were swimming in the same circles and referred work back and forth. And she said that my client, Tanner Co., knows things that clients don't know because they get to a new stage of growth and they have stage blindness.
Yeah.
CEOs don't know what they don't know if they're there for the first time, founding CEOs.
Sure.
And that inspired us to dig deeper into this idea of advisory services, which is something that was new for Tanner. They needed to position themselves to be broader than just accounting.
Yeah.
Because they had added these different service lines, which is analogous to a law firm that has new practice areas.
Yes. Yeah.
And so the story was smaller than it needed to be, but expanding it and knowing what to expand it to was what she was inspiring us to think about. And wisdom became the watchword for Tanner.
Yeah.
that they were in the business of giving wise, sage advice in guiding their clients to a successful business outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
then that elevates their whole approach and the view people have of them, and then the amount they can charge. And, once again, that cheap versus,
well,
high luxury, sort of high quality.
yeah, we were refreshing this brand. It was 75 years old, and we
Yeah.
ended up using an owl
Yeah.
to symbolize wisdom. And they have this mascot brand now. And we talked about that sea of sameness a few minutes ago. So
Yeah.
in comparison to other accounting and advisory firms,
Right.
Tanner really stands out because they're different,
Sure.
but they're different in a way that's relevant. And that relevance was inspired and informed by a conversation with someone who was kind enough to take her time to share her perception about Tanner with me. And that's where that idea came from. We recognized it as a moment of truth, and then we amplified it. And now they're able to command a premium because they've positioned themselves as wise advisors, not just the people who prepare a commoditized tax return.
Yes. Okay. So that actually leads to my next question. The difference between growth and scaling. So growth, I typically just see like, oh, we've got a new client. And then what's the difference between that and actually like looking at long-term scaling?
Long-term scaling results from finding pockets of opportunity that you can harvest for a sustained period of time. And what I mean by that is you've got product market fit. You found a problem, an inefficiency in the marketplace that you are uniquely qualified to solve and satisfy. And you know the right words to unlock the hearts, minds, and wallets of the people who have those problems. And if you find that opportunity, that avenue, that lane, and you've got barriers to entry because you are uniquely qualified to satisfy it, you've got a business model that allows you to serve that market in a way that's profitable that others can't replicate, that's a blue ocean opportunity. You can provide more value with better margins than anybody else. And clients will eat that up all day long.
Yeah. Well, I think your example of this accounting firm that repositioned themselves as a advisory firm, like right there, all of a sudden, I'm just imagining the numbers like going way up, because it goes from, like you're describing, this commodity of, okay, here's my tax return. Is it going to cost me like $95 or whatever? Versus I'm going to take a look at your taxes and find a way to save you tens of thousands of dollars. And of course, you're going to pay me more than $95 for that. You're going to pay me, a value that's equivalent to the level of that advice. And all that is a language and a twist of that message that just elevates it, along with a really beautiful brand and the owl and all of those things that are going to keep it memorable. That is the kind of thing where I could see, the leaps in revenue. Whereas, oh, okay, last year was $95. This year's going to be $98. And then next year, that's growth, yes.
Yeah.
But not really. I mean, that's not scaling.
Yeah, there's a book I wanted to point to as part of this conversation.
Yeah.
Karen, called Scaling.com, or that's the name of the company anyway. Benjamin Hardy is writing this book, and it's new. I'm not sure what the name of it's going to be. You could put it in the show notes. I'm sure we could find it.
Okay.
But Dr. Benjamin Hardy teaches this idea of focus, frame, and floor. And the reason I like this book and concept in context of this conversation is he says that you can dramatically accelerate your growth and compress the timeline it's going to take to achieve your desired outcome by listening for the highest signals that are suggesting that you've found an opportunity that is unique to you and that you could have more of if only you focus more on those high-level opportunities and said no to lesser things.
Yes.
So you establish a floor below which you will not go.
Yeah.
You will stop serving clients that are below the best and highest use of your time and talents. You will stop discounting your work, and you will focus on those opportunities that are a great fit, not just a good fit.
Yes.
And if you can focus and frame your value on the relationships that matter most and raise the floor, then you can really grow a lot faster. And that's what this process of branding helps people get clear on is what should I be doing with my time and talents? What is the best and highest use of this scarce resources I have to bring to bear on these problems? Who do I want to be serving? And once you get clear about that, and if you're consistent with it, you can dramatically accelerate your growth and multiply the value of your brand and your business.
Yeah. There's so many books that, as you were describing that are along those same lines. We, at the end of my MBA program, we did StrengthsFinder, which at the time was done through Gallup. Similar idea that you find your strengths, but you also find these things that are weaknesses, not to build up your weaknesses, but to recognize that you are not going to waste time on those weaknesses. These are not going to be the things. You are going to find other people in your organization where they fill those gaps in your weaknesses so that you are solely focused on your strengths and not wasting time trying to build your weaknesses up to, some, baseline, instead of taking your strengths farther. The other thing I read all the time and see in various branding books and strategy books is about kind of getting that fear of out of the way. Because on the reverse side, this idea of saying no to those bottom feeder, low cost clients, again, is scary. And that, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have these bills, I have to pay my expenses and whatever. And taking that and getting it out of the way and imagining those as being a giant hurdle in the way of a huge paying, let's say 10x client that is sitting right behind them, but they can't get to you because that kind of bottom feeder guy is in their way.
And it sucks you of your energy.
Yes.
I forget the name of those creatures in Harry Potter that would hover and suck the soul.
Dementors?
Dementor, yeah. Those kinds of clients just suck your soul dry.
Yes, they do. They make your life miserable. And it's just, you feel this misalignment with everything. And there's a lot of analogies I could put in here to, just human relationships, but it's just a bad fit. And when you just, have that conversation and say, especially to yourself, this is a bad fit. This is not, it's keeping the space open for the good fit. And, and not to get too woo about all of this stuff, but this is how you really grow too, is by getting all that garbage out of the way.
Exactly. And the name of that book is The Science of Scaling.
Oh, awesome.
Grow your business bigger and faster than you think possible.
Well, so that actually leads to the book review part.
Yeah, I think this conversation is tilted towards this book by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And the reason I love it is because you have to believe there's something better.
Yeah.
And you have to have a mindset that says, I'm saying no to lesser things so I can say yes to bigger things.
Yeah.
And you have to believe that there is opportunity on the other side of scarcity.
Yes. So what's the science part? So if it's talking about the science of scaling, because all of the things that we were talking about up until now is a lot of this sort of emotional, it's a little bit scary. There's this scarcity feeling. I'm not going to be able to pay the bill. But what is the part where he's talking about the science of it, like your mental kind of process behind it, or what is it?
It's mindset driven. He's looked at the literature, and what the most progressive coaches and psychologists have learned is that the people who achieve more look at their future from the future back.
Yes.
Instead of from the back forward. What I mean by that is your history doesn't dictate your future. A lot of us have been taught that whatever we've been is what we're going to be. And with the new perspective that Dr. Benjamin Hardy brings in this book, he talks about identify who you want to be in the future and let that identity define what you do today.
Yes.
And if you make decisions and take action that's consistent with who you want to be in the future, you will become that person.
Yeah.
You have to do things. It's not like you can just imagine that it's going to happen and then it somehow manifests. So there is work to be done.
Yeah.
But if I think to myself, where do I believe I want to be? And that's really the foundational question is, what do you want?
Yes.
What do you want? And then make decisions that are consistent with what you want. And
that
branding,
leads you there.
And it leads you there.
Yeah.
And so many of the times we're sincere with ourselves.
Yeah.
And we're honest and we say, we know what to do.
Yes.
It's
been sitting there all the time. There's a voice that you keep shoving over to the side that's telling you, you already know. You don't need us on this podcast to tell you. You got that voice. Just stop telling it to be quiet. Let it come to the forefront.
I said yes to a client recently that ended up not being a great fit. And that took so much more energy than the bigger projects that actually required more work, but were more enjoyable.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to be a misfit from the starting
Yep.
line. It's like Cinderella's stepsisters trying to force that foot in that glass slipper. It's just a forced fit. It's not going to fit. It's never going to feel comfortable for either party.
I feel like every few years, though, I need to sort of make that mistake, because every so often I will do the same thing. And I'm like, what just happened? And it's like, okay, I'm teaching myself the same lesson again, that, and then I'm good for a little while. And then I'm like, oh, I know I can help this person. I know that, I can make things better, despite the following laundry list of reasons why I probably shouldn't. And then I make a mistake and I'm like, I knew it. This was my fault because I broke my own rule. So
I call those, Karin, I don't know if this is something you've thought about, but conditions for success.
Yes. Oh, that's awesome.
What are the conditions for success? I learned this from Mandy Ellefson. She coaches agencies like mine on how to scale. Interestingly, we all could use a good coach.
That's
and
amazing.
She taught me this concept of, if you aren't willing to get clear and make these choices that are in alignment, then you're not going to become what you're capable of.
Yeah. It's like making, let's say a cake. If you forget the sugar, it's not going to be very good.
Or if you say, I know, I'll just substitute this ingredient.
Yeah, it's going to be gross.
And you have clients who come to you and say, I hear you on your process, but we'd like you to make an exception. Or would you be willing to accommodate this carve out? The answer is no.
No. Yes.
Because unless all of these conditions for success are fulfilled and satisfied, you won't get your desired outcome.
And you and I have seen what happens. Like, I can speak from experience about doing that substitution. It doesn't work. So you're coming to me for my expertise and all of the years of experience that I have seen these things happen. I've seen people try to make those copycat websites and I see what happens. And so you're coming to me to help in the same way that your clients come to you as a lawyer to help them avoid these future problems. You and I are doing the same thing. I have seen this fail and I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to make sure that you are on the track to make this work. And so when you ask me that question, I'm here to help.
Exactly.
And so if you don't want to listen, okay, bye.
Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to work together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, Jed, what is the action item that you would think that after listening to this episode, people should process, think it through, think about all of these amazing ways of thinking of their brand in terms of not being cheap, going with a high value, high quality, scalable message? What's the first thing they should actually do?
As a takeaway from today's conversation, Karin, I would suggest that people write down their assumptions as to what the messages are they think resonate, and ask 3 people who represent the audience you think those messages are going to resonate with if you're right.
Yes.
And ask them, what do you like? What don't you like? And why? And the and why part's really important. I'm all for A/B testing. However, when you A/B test, you don't know why one solution or execution worked and another didn't. Yeah. With these conversations, you can understand why. And when you get the why, you can unlock new opportunities that raise the floor. That's gold.
Yeah.
Figurative and literal gold.
Seriously. Yeah. And that's where you build off of. And so ask why. And then the only thing I would add is be quiet. Listen to what they have to say. Stop talking and stop asking, and then be quiet and listen and write it down, because that's it. You just need that gold to build things and truly scale instead of just plain old growth.
Or instead of just getting lucky.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you want a big account and you don't know why, could you do it again on demand? That doesn't scale.
Right. Exactly. Luck is really tricky to scale.
It is.
Yeah. Jed Morley is the CEO of Backstory. Thank you so much for being here. This was a great conversation.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the CounselCast podcast. Be sure to visit our website at counsel-cast.com for the resources mentioned on the episode and to give us your feedback. If you enjoyed this episode, I would appreciate if you could rate and review the podcast on Apple and subscribe to your favorite podcast platform. See you on the next one.